So we're going to black out the screen and then we'll get started. Thank you to the power. Thank you for joining the Power of One Voice with your host, Rare Soul. Well, I can't talk today. Thank you. Where we explore raw truth, healing journeys, and unique resilience in ourselves. Today's episode features a powerful, reflective voice, an Alaskan born artist, athletic, musician, caregiver, and sound healer. From playing sports to his youth and finding solace in music after an injury, he walked a path of harmony and healing. He's played in metal bands with lifelong friends, opened for the iconic GWAR, I think I said that right, and later studied psychology and sound therapy. Diving deep into chanting, mantras, and meditative movement, he's not only helped people move on the dance floor, but also helped them move past trauma, creative blocks, and self-doubt. And behind the rhythm is a man who spent his life caring for others. From preschoolers to those healing at home overnight. Let's dive into the story. Let's dive into the story that dances between volume and silence, heartbreak and harmony. Tune in and feel the beat of the transformation. Scott, I'm going to bring you up.
Hello.
Hi, Scott. How you feeling today?
I'm doing good. Like you said during the little intro, I am a caregiver and I'm an overnight caregiver, and so I actually
Yeah.
had a shift last night. And usually, I have a moment where my body says, "Hey, you need to catch up on your rest," and it ended up being right before this. So I am a little bit groggy, but I am awake and here for, yeah, the connection. Because
Awesome.
yeah,
Uh,
I.
so your
Uh,
camera's kind of crooked. I can only see about, there you go.
And then also, I have not opened for GWAR yet, but we are going to open for GWAR very soon at the beginning of August.
Awesome.
So that's but that was, other than that, everything that you said was stuff that I've gone through and the journey.
Okay, perfect. Hey, Dr. Giggles, how are you doing? Thank you. Okay, well, let's just get right into it then.
That's great.
What was it like growing up in Anchorage, Alaska?
Well, cool. Yeah. So I grew up in outside of Anchorage. It was considered the municipality of Anchorage. It was 10 miles outside of Anchorage in a town called Eagle River, and then 5 miles up a mountain. Uh, so I was always had a lot of nature around me, a lot of uh, the stuff that comes with Alaska, the extreme light to no light. Um, I had that all as I was growing up, and I really enjoyed elements of Alaska while also really having a difficult time with parts, mostly the darkness. Um, would be a very difficult just season for me to be with the darkness from the winter. Um, it gets very
Okay.
very dark in Alaska. So for those that don't know, as you get further north, the light and the dark cycle is much more extreme for winter and summer. And summer, it's light like it's basically right when the sun starts to go down and it's still light outside. It stays that way all night on in the summers. And then during the winters, we maybe get light from like 12 noon to 3 in the afternoon. So very low amounts of light during the winter, and then so much during the summer. And so that definitely has affected me through my life, in just the having the light and the summer vibes, and then very much the hibernation vibes. And so I very much can go from being a very introverted to being a very extroverted person, and can flip pretty seasonally towards those things. A lot of people do, but they also find that people with darker skin can also end up having that affect them a bit more. And so genetically, I'm mixed. I've got a father that is black and my mother's white, and I honestly there didn't really run into any issues with that. That's oftentimes a question, but uh, honestly, there was a lot of inclusivity in Alaska. Um, but yeah, I grew up in a city called Eagle River, and I grew up on a mountain within Eagle River, and I had lots of trees and nature to run around in. Uh, we're also sort of taught, though, when we're kids to be aware of nature and make sure that we're not being unsafe in nature. There's not anything poisonous in Alaska, but there are many big animals that could uh, hurt you if you aren't careful or if you startle them. And so, as I was, growing up, I always loved playing outside, but there was always a look out for moose, look out for bears, look out for porcupines and wolves and things that I would see daily where I was, well, not daily, but often. Like literally, we would have bears come up to our porch and just like on the porch, and it was magical. Um, or moose, like, and it was actually after I left my mom, there was a moose that ended up having her calves on the property, and so they took like a couple weeks on our property, just sort of like learning how to walk and run, and she ended up getting a lot of footage during that time. But it wasn't uncommon for us to just look out the door and see nature,
That's
which was
pretty
so
cool.
so cool. Um, but yeah, so growing up there, I enjoyed elements. It was also one of those things where I didn't know really what I had until I was gone from there. I appreciate it much more now than I did when I was a teenager. But I think that's pretty common for a lot of uh, kids where they grow up. You're like, I don't like where I grew up as much.
So, what role did your parents play into shaping you and your outlook on life and creativity?
Totally. So my parents are both creative and both teachers. So they would teach. My dad taught for a while, but when I was growing up, was mostly more admin stuff. He did principal work, was assistant principal at a school that it was a middle school. And when I started going to the middle school, he stopped working there. Yeah, so I would say my father, he definitely influenced me in just that he's always been very supportive of uh, my just everything that I do, and my mother the same. My dad tends to be a bit more logical, and my mom's a bit more heart centered, spiritual, and I feel like I'm a pretty mixed combination of the two, where I have a very deep spiritual connection, but I also need to ground it in science a lot of the times for me. Um, and so when we'll get into it later, but when I went to school, I studied chanting and looked at, okay, what is the scientific benefits of actually chanting beyond just the spiritual sense that I know I get from it? How can I tie this to others or help others find that this is a helpful practice, even if they're not spiritual? Um, and so I feel like I've always had a pretty good balance of that. And then my parents always have been very encouraging of any creative endeavor I've gone forward with, even if they don't necessarily like the music. So, like I said, I've played lots of music growing up. Or you said, uh, and honestly, one of the big moments, and yeah, was I got injured when I was in middle school doing a wrestling match, and post that, I was unable to really play sports any longer. And because of that, I ended up going into music pretty much with all of my after school energy, where a lot of people would go and play football or hockey or baseball. I would go and do the music thing. And I did a lot of it with friends that I had known since preschool. So I guess to take those steps back, though, with the way that my parents really affected my upbringing was, yeah, they've always been very supportive of anything that I've wanted to do. And my yeah, like I played in punk bands and rock bands, and they would go to those, but as I got to more of the extreme, more metal stuff, they'd still support me, but they weren't coming to the shows as much for that kind of stuff.
Right. So let's see, because you pretty much just answered the whole first segment right there.
Well, yay. I'm trying to think if there's anything else
Okay,
though. Like, I
let's
mean,
let's go with how would you describe your childhood and what kind of kid were you?
okay, that's a good way to be able to tie it into some of these other things. So, I grew up in a small town outside of Anchorage, which is already a small city. Um, and within Eagle River, very early on, I went to a preschool where I met friends that have been, yeah, lifelong friends. A lot of friends that I've played music with. Um, Actually, like four of the people that I went to preschool with, I had been in bands with at different times in my life, and I'm friends with all of them still. We've had our moments and our ups and downs, as you would expect from having a friendship or a relationship for 37 years. Um, and I feel like, yeah, again, we all had parents that were very supportive of the things that we would want to do. And when we were young, one of the things that happened, and this was before the injury happened, we knew that we wanted to play music. We knew we wanted to play music together. And there was a moment that we all sat around and we said, all right, what instrument do you want to play for this band that we are going to play in? And we all made a decision at that time what we were going to play, and that was what we played for the rest of the time, or what pushed us into the directions that we all went. And so my friend Sam started playing guitar, my friend Justin started playing drums, and you know, my friend Britton started playing bass, and I was like, I'm going to do vocals, and that was pretty much the positions that we played all through our growing up. And that was good, but also had some negatives in that for the longest time, I told myself that I had started too late to learn any instruments and to learn any of the things that they had played, because they had all learned when they were young. And so I went, well, I'm never going to be as good as them. What's the point, kind of deal? And this will come up a little bit later, but uh, one of the things, and it's honestly one of the the sadder moments. It's not sad, but it was like one of those moments that was a traumatic moment that ended up leading to uh, more practice and becoming better at the music. But when we were young and we all decided on the instruments that we were going to play, we started a little band and we started playing a little bit, and then one of the friends decided one day that it would be a good idea for us to all go around a circle and say one thing that we didn't like about each other. No good things, just a bad thing. And that like crushed the band at the time. And the friend said, I can't sing, which that was the only thing that I did at the time, kind of deal. Not a constructive piece of feedback. And, you know, it ended up being just a like moment. But through that, I was like, oh, I gotta. It pushed me to become a better vocalist. Um, and so yeah, I grew up with a group of friends. We were constantly being creative and making projects. I think that total, I was probably in four different band combinations with those guys. Um, and yeah, it was magic. It was cool getting to grow up with a group of friends where we did support each other as much as we did. Thank you for the community tickets. Um, yeah, I am trying to think of anything else about. I mean, so the question was, how was my childhood? Um, yeah, I was there until I was 21 in Anchorage area. I mean, I moved around a little bit once I was out of my house. but grew up in the same house. And yeah, as I said, was in a lot of bands, and the bands were all very popular for the area. So popular that some of them are still remembered, and the whole reason that this band is going to open for GWAR and be the direct opening support for them is because people still remember us so fondly when we played. So that's a cool thing. It's a cool experience to get to revisit that.
I'm so sorry. I had
Oh,
kids.
it's all good.
Kids are screaming. I'm
Oh,
so
all good, all
sorry.
good.
Okay. What sports did you play growing up, and how serious were you about them?
Yeah. So growing up, I mean, started with, the soccer and the basketball, just playing, with other kids kind of deal. Um, and I've always liked sports, but sports were never my main.
Your
I was
foot
good at
time?
them, but they weren't necessarily my passion. And the whole decision was made for me during a wrestling match. The whole decision to move from sports, and not really by choice, was made during a wrestling match when I was in middle school. I, at the beginning of my wrestling career, was not the best at wrestling. Um, and then I had my dad give me this pep talk. And my dad has had a couple of these pep talks in my life where everything just clicked. And all of a sudden, I became, in that moment, a beast, as they would say. And another moment happened when I was at a battle of the bands with this band, Corruption, or not Corruption, but Brothers Contra, um, where it was just this moment that it flipped for me. And then after that, it was like nothing but win, as they say, until I got hurt in this wrestling match. So uh, my father, like, I had lost this whole season pretty much, didn't win a match my first year of wrestling. And then he has this pep talk with me that he says the right combination of words at the right time. And he's like, you gotta get at it. You gotta go for it. You gotta just push. And he said it just the right way that, that year when we went to our state championship, my weight division, the person got sick, and so they had to put me up into varsity. And I ended up winning every single one of my matches after that moment. After my dad told me, the right combination of words, I was a beast. I didn't lose. So fast forward to the next year, it's for state, and there is one person that I haven't gone up against. And this person was suspended from school at the time that our schools were going up against each other. And everybody else, he had won. So he was undefeated, I was undefeated. And he had won everybody's match within a minute by injury, usually. He broke some kids' arms, dislocated some things, really was also a beast. So I was going up against him for first and second in state, and I was doing pretty well. And then I used to get bloody noses all the time in Alaska. It's very dry there. And I end up losing in wrestling. If you use up all of your downtime, all of your blood time, as they say, you have to go into a defensive position called referee's position, where you're on your hands and your knees. And you have the person behind you in an offensive position. And so while this guy was behind me, and at the time I was heavyweight, but I was the lowest heavyweight. And heavyweight for wrestling, usually the weight divisions are like within 10 pounds of each other. But heavyweight, for whatever reason, can be like within like 30 or 40 pounds sometimes of the lowest to what is the highest. So I was the lowest, this guy was the highest, and he was like just massive. So he wraps his legs around my leg, and he just lays straight back and dislocates one of my kneecaps. And I'm winning at the time. I have to put out more blood time, and so they put me back in referee's position when I get back in, and he does it to my other leg. And so it dislocates both of my legs in a wrestling match. And then I end up like at the time we're close to the end of the match, and I'm like, all right, I really want to beat this guy. Before the match, his parents had come up to my parents and had talked some not nice things, like, and so I was just like, also had that fire where I was like, yo, I want to. And it was funny because, again, like I'd said, all of these other teams, he had hurt all of their heavyweights in the match. So there was like a bunch of people. It was the last match of the tournament, because they do it in weight divisions. And so just having all of these other teams and their heavyweights like in casts and crutches and all cheering, like it was just like, I really wanted to win. And so he was beating me by like a point, and I was so sweaty, I slipped out of this hold that he had, and I ended up winning the match. I had to go directly to the emergency room afterwards, which was pretty crazy. And then from there, I had a whole year of just getting injured. And because of that, like I tried to go back into sports a little bit, tried to go into swimming, tried to get back into wrestling when I went into high school. But it just wasn't something, like I just kept dislocating my knees. I kept hurting myself. So because of that, I ended up moving into music. And this is like one of the themes I think that's really important throughout my stories is sometimes life doesn't happen in the way that we expect it to. And that is okay because it opens up the doors for other things to happen if we're open to it. And I've had moments where I've been really upset or sad that things didn't go in the way that I would see them possibly going, or the way that it makes sense for it to go in my head. But every one of those times has led me to exactly where I'm supposed to be. And so I, at that time, again, got injured, but I was doing really good at wrestling. So I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm so like frustrated. Like this was what I was good at. And then I moved directly into music. And rather than having to go to practice every day after school, I would go, or to sports practice every day after school, I would go to band practice every day after school. And so that was, again, just magic. And again, getting to do that with my friends, was great. It was awesome.
So how did your injury impact you, like mentally or emotionally at the time?
I mean, I sort of said that, but I'll try to maybe make that a little bit clearer. At the time, I was very sad about it. I was upset that I had, felt like this was a thing that I was really good at, and all of a sudden I couldn't do that thing.
Okay.
And I could
Sorry
have
about
held
that.
on to that, but at the same time, when I let that expectation go and thinking I know the best and know how it's supposed to go, it led me to music. And I've talked to other musicians that's been a similar kind of track to their music learning, where like I've had a friend that was a dancer who got hurt, and they weren't able to dance. So instead of dancing, they took time and just put it into music.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, let's see, where are we at here? So that's when it pretty much just became it stopped being just background noise and you actually like dove really deep into it, or you just kind of fiddled with it for a little bit.
no, it's when we dug deep into it. I mean, it was always friends though. Like we were always playing together, and we were always trying to do music together. But yeah, this is like that was the moment that it was like, all right, we're gonna be serious in that we're gonna practice every day after school, kind of thing. And so for the longest time, we would go to my friend Justin's house, who had the drum set, and we would go practice. And this band had a similar moment to the wrestling moment, where at first I was doing okay with it, but it wasn't until we had this battle of the bands, and my dad was like, again, had this talk where he was like, you gotta not just, you gotta go for it. And if you go for it, you guys are really good, you can win this battle of the bands. And we did. And from there, it was just like, there was no question in my head that, we couldn't do those things. Um,
So the genre and band influence your sound and most during those years.
so we were also a lot into video games. So the first band was called Brothers Contra, after Super Mario Brothers and the game Contra. and we would all play video games, but then make a bunch of music. So like it would be us going to, one of our houses, play a bunch of video games, play a bunch of music, and then go our separate ways, kind of deal. And so video games have always had a pretty like strong part in my growing up. My father got a regular Nintendo before I was born, and got sort of hooked by my mom's sister, my aunt Cami. And so we grew up, with all of the systems, and that was always such a fond memory. Um, but yeah, so the influence was video games, and then also within those video games, games like Tony Hawk, with the musical soundtracks. So at the time, we were really into punk music and into alternative rock and into ska music, and so that was the kind of stuff that we would try to play. I would say also, yeah, movies and TV shows. I was very much into pop culture growing up, and still am, a little bit more like the earlier retro-y pop culture, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Um, but I collect physical media and horror movies and
What's your favorite
old
movie?
TV shows, all that kind of stuff. And how a lot of, again, like we would do the music, but a lot of our time would be us just like vegging out together, watching TV shows and laughing and having inside jokes.
What was your favorite horror movie?
What was my favorite? Return of the Living Dead. So it's a little bit
Oh, I knew
silly. It's
you
a
were gonna
B
say
movie.
that.
I love the Night of the Living Dead series in general, and then so Night of the Living Dead was made by two guys, George R. R. Romero, and I'm spacing on the other guy's name, but the other guy basically wanted to take it in a more silly direction, where George R. or Romero wanted to take it in a more serious direction and have all of this social commentary, which I do love that, and those movies, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, all of his movies, brilliant, love them. But one of the first like horror movies that I sort of like snuck because my parents would record a bunch of movies on tape, and so like when they were gone one time while I was old enough, but still not old enough to probably be watching that movie, I found the movie and I was like, oh, I'm gonna put this in kind of, and I watched it and it was just such a like, whoa, this is crazy. And so that was a big, connection to that. And then, when all of the DVD shops or the movie stores started going out of business, or not even when they were starting to go out of business, but when they were starting to phase out VHS, me and one of my good friends, Britton, we went and started buying up all of the 80s and early 90s horror movies that they were getting rid of on VHS. And a lot of them would have like buy, five for $10 or whatever. And so for a while we had a very large collection like of like 400 80s to early 90s horror movies. And some like ninja movies and some like kids like stuff that we remembered from back when we were younger. Um, so yeah, a lot of nostalgia, played into it even at an early age.
So, what does it mean to you to reunite with GWAR and open?
So the band that I'm reuniting with is a band called Corrupture,
Oh, corruption.
and GWAR is this band that is worldwide renowned, pretty legendary. They're not a band that I really listen to much. What I know them most for is they are very much like a performance art kind of metal band. So they dress up in these big sort of monster suits. They've got big axes and things on stage, and it's one of those shows that if you're in the front couple of rows, you're probably going to leave that show covered in stuff. Um, and so for some people, they love that. And even in the metal band, I remember people really love it. Like I would get so sweaty. And I would just be headbanging, and my sweat would just be flying all over. And people would be like, "Oh my gosh, like Scott just had his sweat just like hit me," but they'd be like freaking out in the best way. They'd be so excited about it. Um, but yeah, so it's wild to be reuniting, because yeah, we haven't been a band for about 15 years. I moved down to Seattle along with four of the members, or three of the other members, and one 2 weeks before the move decided that they didn't. Their father talked them out of making the move, and it was a very hard situation. It was one of these situations where, and like I said, this is sort of one of these reoccurring situations in my life where something doesn't work out that I really think is a sure thing. And it's happened twice with bands. The punk band that we were in at first, Brothers Contra, we were doing really, really well, and then had just like a breaking up right when we were really hitting it. Like we had a fret. The bass player was very good at networking online, early online days, dial up days in chat rooms and things. And so he was always talking us up. And he had gotten to the point where he had gotten us basically accepted onto Rancid's record label. I think it's like Kick the Boot or Bootstrap, or I can't remember what it was called. But yeah, we had basically gotten the attention of the singer of Rancid, a famous punk band. And right as that happened, our band imploded. And it was like such a hard moment because we were like, we're right here, guys. Like, what are we doing? And so something similar happened with this metal band. We got to this point where we were playing for any big act that would come through Alaska, even if it wasn't our musical style, because they knew we could draw a nice crowd. And we were getting to play with legends and people that we grew up listening to. And we would have these bands come and they'd be like, what are you doing? Like, why aren't you touring? Why aren't you playing out? And it's hard to tour from Alaska. And so that's the big reason. You either have to fly all your gear down or rent all your gear or drive through Canada. Very expensive any way you look at it. So the move was planned so that we could start, taking it to that next level. And then 2 weeks before the move, one of the members said, yeah, my dad told me I'm not going to be able to find Epitaph. Yeah, thank you. That was right. And so when we made it down, we thought about continuing the band because it was four of us still together. And we were just like, yeah, maybe not. We're just not feeling it. And when that happened, I felt, again, sort of bummed out that I felt like we had gotten to this point where it felt like almost a sure thing. Like literally we would have people come up to us while we were in Seattle and recognize, like I for 5 years after moving to Washington, would still have people recognize me from Corruption. People that would be like, I saw your band in Anchorage. Like, that was so cool. And so I felt bad at the time because I love music. And I had, again, convinced myself that I couldn't be a guitar player or a key player. And so I talked myself out of it for a long time. And that was the permission moment that it was like, oh, it was not only permission, but it was, if I want to keep music in my life, I gotta, start learning myself. And so then I started learning about when I was 21. And I guess, yeah, it was 21, 22 is when I started learning how to play guitar and getting more serious about all of the different instruments and stuff. But it ended up being one of those, again, blessings in disguise, where it was, I had expected something and it didn't go the way that I wanted it to. And as soon as I was like, oh, okay, this is all right, that's where it led to this magic where it was like, okay, yeah, music. You can do all the other parts.
So, after you got back into music, you studied psychology and sociology, or psychology, and how did you find your focus on positive psychology?
Yeah. I've always done caregiving throughout my life, even when I was in high school. I mean, there was a couple jobs that weren't caregiving, but for the most part, I've always connected with people, and I've tended to usually have a pretty optimistic and positive personality, for better or for worse. Excuse me. When I went to school up in Bellingham, Washington, so I moved to Seattle, and then in Seattle, I ended up being gifted a mantra, Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha. And I had a friend that was going through a hard time that had gotten over their hard time, and they had said somebody had gifted it to them. And I was going through a moment of transition and difficulty. As I had said, some of these things were going on. And he's like, try this mantra, and, you can read up about it. There's information on it. And at the time I was like, because I said earlier on in this interview or this podcast, I tend to have that spiritual sense, but also like my logic part comes into play pretty hard sometimes. And so I'm like, okay, I want to know, more about this. And at the time, I went to I think it was like a week or two after he had gifted me this mantra and was like, you should try it, give it a try, see what happens. These are the things that happened to me or that I noticed happened to me while I did it. And so I ended up, doing this interview, or not interview. I'm in an interview right now. Tried it for a little while. I was like, yeah, this is interesting. This is cool. And then I ran into two people. Like it was a couple at this show, and I was with a friend, and this couple invited us all back to their house for so I was talking to them, and they were just like, I was talking to them about this mantra work that I had been told about, or this chant, Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha. And the guy lights up and he goes, I have this book about mantras. If you come back, I'll lend it to you, kind of thing. And I've never seen these people again. I don't even know their names, but they gifted me this book. And when I was gifted the book, that was where I went pretty much full in a lot more and started learning a lot more mantras other than Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha. And then, when I finally was able to go to school again.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that slower?
Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha.
And do you normally say it that fast, or do you normally say it a little slower?
You say it fast. Well, I do. You can say mantras however you want to. You can sing them. You can whisper them. But I like to get into a rhythm. So mine would be like Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapatiye Namaha. And I would do that for 108 times. And so it's actually been something I've been doing a lot on live, and actually been meeting it with probably more success than even my music lives. I've been doing a midnight Pacific time to 2:00 mantra live, where people have been really coming. So I see that question, Queen of Words, and the 108, supposedly, according to this book that I have, and I've heard different things, but it is the number of energy, veins that basically leave the heart. And so it fills every one of those. It's also, it's the number of prayer beads on the mala. So usually you would use a mala. I actually use my hands to count. I learned that later on. But a rosary for, Catholic and more Christian church kind of stuff, that has half of the number. And so, there's all of these connections. And I would say that, anyway, but you'd ask the positive psychology thing. I won't get too sidetracked on this weave. So when I went up to school, again, having done a bunch of caregiving, having already been a lot more pointed in a positive and optimistic way, when I started going to school, I was like, okay, I care about psychology. I've also had to deal with different kinds of mental stuff, especially around seasonal affective stuff. And I talked about that a little bit earlier with the extreme light and dark in Alaska. A lot of people deal with seasonal depressions.
Right.
And so that's something I've had to deal with my whole life for the most part. And I've learned lots of different tools to deal with that. But you often will hear that people that go to school for different things, a lot of the times will go to school for what's going to help them, or because they feel the passion towards whatever. So you'll meet a lot of people that are going into psychology that maybe do have some stuff that they're trying to figure out about themselves. Maybe they've got depression or ADD or autism or something that is, affecting their life, and they want to understand more and how to help others with that. And so that was like a big reason. And then when I was at school, it was right time, right place kind of deal. In that I had taken a long enough time off that I knew what I was interested in. I took like 5 years off from school before getting back into school. I took my first 2 years after college, or after high school. I went and got my AA. Well, almost got my AA. And then I had a couple more credits before I got my AA, which actually was very lucky because I had done that in Alaska. And had I gotten my AA in Alaska, I would have had to retake all of the general requirements. But because I didn't get my AA in Alaska and I was just a couple credits short, all of my credits transferred when I moved to Washington, and I was able to get what was called a direct transfer AA. And I only had to take one class, didn't have to retake a bunch of things, got my AA, and then went directly that next semester to Western Washington, which is in Bellingham, Washington, which is about an hour and a half north of Seattle, directly in between Vancouver, Canada, and Seattle, like same distance if I were to go to either. And after, I went there, I ended up getting to do a music minor. So I was able to explore music, but then, went in for psychology. And while I was there, was like signing up for classes and stuff, and saw that positive psychology was a thing. And I was like, that's so interesting. I've never heard of positive psychology. What is that? And so positive psychology is the psychology of what is right with people. When somebody's flourishing, when somebody's doing well, what are the contributing factors to that? Are there ways to cultivate more wellness? And so it looks at things like exercise. It looks at things like values and character strengths. It looks at things like religions and philosophies, and all of these different things that, could possibly contribute to our wellness. The crazy thing about this field, and one of the craziest facts to me about this field, is it only became a field of psychology in the early 2000s. We were not studying positive psychology before the 2000s. We were studying abnormal psychology, which is the psychology of what is wrong. So, do you fit this diagnosis? And if you do, then this is the thing that you have. And so instead of that, it takes a whole different approach. And you might have, autism or ADD or ADHD or anxiety or depression, but you can be with those things in a way that, you acknowledge you have those things, but again, you can work with them in a different way, which is really, really cool. And so that was really, what got me in was as soon as I started learning about it, it was magic. It was so cool. It was like, oh, this is like way up my alley. And then from there, I started also focusing in on sound therapy and meditation. And so my focuses while I was doing that were binaural beats, so audio-visual entrainment, so helping your brain either speed up or slow down through lights and audio cues, and then chanting. And so I'd already been looking at chanting. And again, I had had time to sort of realize that it was something that I was interested in. And all of a sudden I start to learn, as I'm in my psychology courses, how to do the scientific method and all of the ways that we can study something and the importance of research. And so I was able to get a couple other people interested in the concept of mantras. And we made a couple different experiments that had to do with mantras during 2 of the semesters, both looking, I think, at the same thing. I'd have to actually look back because it's been a while. But the main thing that we ended up finding during it was that chanting mantras, there is some significance in its ability to help one break from ruminative thinking. Ruminative thinking is the thought like trap that we can sometimes get into when we start thinking about something and it just rolls out and we just keep thinking about it and we just can't escape from that thought and that feeling. So there's some significance that we found. We would, in the experiment, induce rumination. So we'd ask somebody to think about something that, was a hard thing to think about and basically get to that point. And then we, as a group, all in the room, would all chant aham prema, which is I am divine love. It was a shorter mantra, shorter than most of the ones that I do, but we were trying to make it a little bit easier for people that don't have much mantra connection. So we found there was some significance there for breaking ruminative thought, but we also found that there was some significance to helping one go into flow state. And flow state is when somebody is in optimal experience, and some of the signs that you might be in flow state are time distorts, maybe time speeds up or slows down. You might start hearing different things. And there's, both of those things were said to have been experienced by the participants in this experiment. So there was, again, some, tie to, there could be some significance to chanting of Sanskrit mantras being able to, one, break one from their ruminative thinking, but two, also help put them into a flow state. And when we're in this flow state or optimal experience or in the zone, we tend to, even if we don't look happy, tend to leave it feeling happier. So that's, a benefit to finding those things that we love, because we'll go into the flow state. Another area, though, that I really got a chance to focus on, and I actually share a lot during my lives here, is this concept of character strengths. And character strengths are this incredible concept that was, again, started because of this field coming about. Not to say character strengths didn't exist before, but to actually come up with a way to look at different people's character strengths and to go, okay, if you want to know how your character strengths rank, how do you do that? Because some of it could be like, you just do some writing and some journaling. A lot of the times you'll sort of know what your signature strengths are, which is usually the top 3 to 7 strengths that somebody has out of 24 that they found.
So you can tell somebody you can tell somebody what their character strength is.
But I can help them. I can help them with that. And when you find that, they've found through, again, being able to look at these different character strengths with a more scientific lens, that if you use your top character strengths more often, you'll go into flow more, but you'll also have a more fulfilling life. And the ones around you can also benefit from it too. It also helps us be aware that not everybody comes to the party the same way. Not everybody has the same strengths. And it helps us honor that fact about ourselves, but also others. There is something called character strength blindness, where we have, again, maybe like 3 to 7 that people would consider their signature strengths. And we have, we use all of these in different combinations and together. But because it's such a part of us, we don't see anything special about that. We don't see, for me, creativity is high and curiosity is high and perspective is high. But at the time, before I knew about this, maybe I wouldn't see that as being something very special because I just come to the world that way. But I'd also in the way be blind to other people. And because I look at the world that way, I might expect other people to look at the world that way and not understand why they're doing that.
Okay, so went through my whole second section again.
This is always the way it goes, Queen. Queen Wards is just like, I was going to hop in the shower. Then I got a phone call and I can't, and I'm listening to interesting lives.
Okay, we went over that. So, how do vinyl beats, soundscapes, mantras all come together in your healing sessions?
Yeah. Um, so sound and connecting with sound has always been just such a powerful experience. I have used music for journaling. I've used music for connection. I've used music for community, or gotten to experience it for all of those things. Um, I feel that, yeah, when I bring it, especially to the table today, um, a big part of why I do what I do is for myself, but then also I want to help others get to where they feel comfortable being able to do uh, the art and do the expression, because I've had moments where I haven't felt like I could, or where I've felt a lot of anxiety grow up around those. Um, so, you know, I love playing music and doing these things for myself, but I also realize that I can help others find ways to be able to express themselves creatively. And so, like, one of the things that I've really been grateful for is like being live and having people come and tell me that they posted themselves singing because they, felt something that I said during the live had them be like, oh, I can do this. I've had a couple friends that I met on here tell me they started going live because I was like, hey, it'd be really, like, I've had such a great time. I've met amazing people and I support however I can. And so that's been really, really cool also. Um,
So if I were to come to you and say, "Hey, figure out my traits," what would I have to do for you to like figure those out?
totally. So the best way is going to be taking the survey that the group came up with that did the research. And it used to be like a 240 question survey, and I think it's half of that now. Might even be less. It might be like 100 questions. Um, but there is a free survey, and there's a couple different versions of it. You can still take the original version, but it's always free. Um, but yeah, I would recommend you take the survey. And you can do that through a website called VIA Character .org. So VIA Character, like a character in a show, .org. And I would recommend that somebody take that. And if they take that, then I'm able to sort of look at what their strengths are, and then we can get deep divey with it. And so, like, one of the books that I really love that helps deep dive is this book called Character Strength Interventions. This book is great in that it has a lot of the research that has happened with different character strengths, with the concept in general. And so I can actually be like, okay, your top strength is this. This is a way that we can nurture this. I can even give you a little bit of a spotlight on the different strengths. And so this book has page spotlights for each of the different strengths. And so it's going to give us the core definition. It's going to give us the essence. It's going to give us the dimensions of that strength, while also giving us like the correlations to other strengths. So it would be like, so for humility, the strength that it's highest correlated with is prudence, fairness, honesty, teamwork, and kindness. So people that have high humility would probably have high prudence, fairness, honesty, teamwork, and kindness.
Hmm.
Not always, because it could be all kinds of different ways. Also gives
So
some research highlights.
so
Yeah.
is like the gift of gab, is that one of the characteristics?
So maybe not the gift of gab, but you know, again, it's not hard and fast where you could make up more. They just needed to make it so that it fit into the scientific box. And they even in the beginning of the book say, there could be more, there could be, you could combine some of these together, but they were able to come out with basically 24 character strengths that all across the world we all cherish. And the way that they looked at that was they got more than 50 scientists together across the world, and they looked at texts, they looked at philosophies, they looked at religions, they watched movies, talked to people within those communities, and they found out what were the things that we were trying to share as good traits of a human. And different places sometimes have different ones that are higher, but they found that these 24 are across cultures, and they're even pretty easy for children to understand. And so the character strengths actually fall under 6 virtues: the virtues of wisdom, the virtue of courage, the virtue of humanity, the virtue of justice, the virtue of temperance, and the virtue of transcendence. And so I can even just like really quickly read off the strengths so you know the 24 while giving a virtue that they're under. So the virtue of wisdom has the creative, or has the strengths, the character strengths of creativity, curiosity, judgment or critical thinking, a love of learning, and perspective. The virtue of courage has the strengths of bravery, perseverance, honesty, and zest. The virtue of humanity has love, kindness, and social intelligence. The virtue of justice has teamwork, fairness, and leadership. The virtue of temperance has the strengths of forgiveness, humility, prudence, and self-regulation. And then the virtue of transcendence has an appreciation of beauty and excellence, gratitude, hope, humor, and spirituality. And so again, if you take this survey, can find where all of your character strengths sit. And we have all of them. Everybody does. You are going to have some that are at the bottom of the list. And sometimes people fixate on those. The thing they found in the research is you really don't have to. You will live such a better life if you really try to focus on your top strengths and you find new and novel ways to use them in your everyday life. You can always get better at your bottom strengths, and that's not a problem. But if you want the most bang for buck for your wellness, find new ways to connect with your top strengths, with your signature strengths in your everyday life. Another practice that's really good to do for this character strength work when you find out about it is to do what's called character strength spotting. And you can do that in your relationships and be like, oh, I see you're really good at leadership. That's awesome. That's really great to see. And you want to do it in natural ways. Or you can tell the person like, hey, I'm trying to do this thing called character strength spotting. I'm sorry if it feels awkward, but I'm going to like tell you some things that I notice about you that are really awesome. Like you're very honest, you're very kind. But it's also important when doing this kind of work, and even for ourselves, we are not just one of these strengths. So don't get like that top strength. Don't be like, I am create, like you are creative and that's part of who you are, but you're also the amalgamation of all of these things coming together, playing together. But the other way that you can character strength spot, and again, really fun way.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you do that on me?
I mean, yeah. I mean, from what I know of you, I mean, so I would say that you have a curiosity, definitely through wanting to like know about people. And ever since I've been on, you've had a lot of perseverance. So you've really been pushing, with all of this. You've got love and kindness that definitely shine. You have, and again, all of these you have. Again, I'm just trying to think of ones that might be, in that top, 15. But again, there's parts of you that I don't know. And sometimes strengths come out in different situations. If somebody's feeling, a little overjudged or something, maybe creativity ends up going low on their list. Or if somebody is like, being a little bit more domineering, maybe, you do have leadership skills, but you take a little bit of a step back and maybe that drops down and you don't end up getting to express that. So a lot of the times these strengths can be dormant. But one of the other ways, again, that you can character strength spot is when you're watching media. And that's one of the ways that they recommend doing it. And try to see what character strengths the characters in that movie or that show or that book are showing. Because a lot of the times these stories, they're made to, be entertaining, but they also will have characters that have these archetypal kind of strengths and these things that we are wanting to say. It's even in the action movie, you got, that person's got charisma, or not charisma, but they've got courage, or they have bravery, because courage is the virtue, but they've got bravery and they got zest because they're just like, I'm gonna do this thing, I'm jumping out of the airplane. Or leadership or teamwork, in those action movies might be something that really, shines as some of the character traits. So it's like try to find those little things, and in that you can make this thing that sometimes is a little bit more of a tune out, turn off kind of situation into a little bit more of a mindful practice. And you don't have to do that all the time. But every now and then, that's a practice that you can do. And you can do it with people that you're around, or you can just do it to yourself and just like take a moment to just like, I wonder what kind of strengths are trying to be shown off.
Are there any negative ones?
So no, well, not in the way that it's done. And so positive psychology really isn't about looking at the negatives. Again, you will have strengths that are on your bottom, and I think a lot of people will sometimes fixate on those bottom strengths. So for me, like self-regulation can be a bit of a bottom strength. And yes, there's many things that I can do to practice self-regulation. But they've found, it's actually sort of funny in the research. And research is funny because it's a lot of the times done with a population of usually college kids that are white and males and some females. And it's a weird, like, research base, because a lot of the times research is being done at schools, at colleges. And so it's not always completely right with, it's not always the best pool of people that you're researching. But what they did find was, again, people that use their top strengths end up tending to be happier and be in a more flourishing state. They found in this study that they did that women that practice their bottom strengths will have their happiness increase still. But they found that males that did more often in this case actually became sadder, less happy when they tried to focus on their bottom skills. I don't know exactly what that says. Again, I think it's a weird thing, but it is a very funny sort of concept that they did end up doing some research, and they were like, so certain people could practice any of them and be like super beneficial. But we do, again, get the most benefit from engaging with our top strengths the most. And again, finding new novel ways to engage with those top strengths is really, really good. And finding ways to interact with your family, your friends, your work, your everyday life with your top strengths more often leads to a happier life, is what they've seen. But again, that weirdness, some people can work on any of them and it's great. And some people, like, being bad maybe at it is like just too much.
Really interesting. So what kind of transformation do you see when people experience meditative dance?
Oh yeah, so that's another area that I'm really into is what's called ecstatic dance. So ecstatic dance is this meditative dance. It's what got me into DJing, and it is a free flow dancing. You're not dancing for anybody but yourself and your body. You move how you want to move. You feel your body. You feel the music, and that ends up leading to a lot of things for a lot of different people. You can move through energy, you can move through blockages, but a lot of the times the way that the meditative dance music goes is you can play any kind of music, but you go with a flow. And so you maybe start from a lower energy where people are sort of feeling a little bit more wispy, to you start to get more high energy, you start to pump and stuff, and then maybe it's so high energy, you have people jumping up and down, you have people hitting the floor, like you get to that high level of energy, maybe it's feeling a little bit more primal, a lot of drums, maybe even some bass music, and you have people like maybe slapping the ground, maybe even literally screaming in the room. And so it's a very inclusive and a very different experience for a lot of people.
I love meditative dance.
But it's so powerful.
It is. I do it for myself, but I asked the question because some people may not know what that is.
Totally. And thank you for asking that. Because, yeah, that was what got me into DJing. And so because of that, I play all kinds of different music. I don't really stick with a genre. I really go by vibes and feels, which is fun. It's a little bit easier for me to do in person than on, like, I do DJ on live almost daily for like an hour or so, but also play guitar and do singer-songwriter and other things and singing bowls and flutes. But it's harder to read the energy of a room when it's all a virtual room. And so when I'm DJing in a room, I can take into account so many different little parts of what's going on. And I can be like, oh, this is not the right kind of music for this moment. And I can make those switches. And the only way that I can really do that here is taking into account room sizes. And that's not always because the music's, not stuff they want to listen to. Sometimes maybe something's glitching or they just like literally just were coming through for a second. And so it's hard sometimes to find the groove to DJ with on the virtual stage, especially with me being as much of a variety ecstatic dance DJ as I am. And so some days I'm like, oh yeah, this set is really good because a lot of people telling me, and I have to almost rely on that a little bit more too, is like people in chat being like, this has been an incredible set, or like, whoa, that transition was awesome. But I don't get that, and so that's been I do get that from chat, but I don't get it from people's body language or again them dancing or I'd be like, maybe we have been in that up for a long time, and I'll notice, oh, people are starting to get a little bit, tired. We need to move to a lower level.
So, have you ever tried putting a whole panel up and like just doing the boxes? So you're in a big box and then put your guests in smaller boxes. And
I have not. We have talked about it a little
that.
bit, and that would be something that I am interested in. I've had one person come up and dance once, and they were just like, "Hey, could I come up and dance?" I was like, "Sure, why not?" And it was so much fun. So that is something to remember. Thank you. Actually,
Yeah, I
that's
think
a
you should
great
at
idea.
least try the panels. And when you do, make sure you invite me because I love meditative dance.
That's actually, this could be one of those game changer moments now that I'm actually thinking about it.
Thank
Because
you.
yeah, I have been here on this app doing this for 4 months now. A couple days ago was my 4 month anniversary of going live. And it has been life changing in being able to connect with people with my music and with my art and with the positive psychology concepts and chanting, and meeting literally just like life changing relationships and having the amount of support here where I've been craving the connections that I've been finding here for a while. And like locally,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Queen of Wands, who are you asking how to move?
oh, shows how you move. So after this, I'm gonna be on a live for myself. I'm doing Community Fest, so we'll be DJing for 2 hours while I'm in 2 times Community Fest. We're trying to finish out Community Fest really strong. Community Fest is the thing that's going on right now. I'm really close to being able to be top 100, and then I would move on to the next round. So after this, I'm gonna hop on and DJ for a couple hours before I go to work. So if you want to see how I dance a little bit, I'll be doing it a little bit then. I wonder if he has to or cussed. I don't know what cussed means.
Just leads the vibe with music or meditation dance. So do you just
Oh,
with the
I don't really
vibe
talk.
or just the music
It's
itself?
usually more with the vibe. You can talk during it though, and sometimes I have. Um, some ecstatic dance instructors or DJs will talk about different moving things and um, things you can pay attention to. Other people are no talking on the dance floor kind of deal, and it's all about this the moving.
Oh, do you lead the
Um,
vibe with music?
how do I?
No, it says, do you lead the vibe with music?
Yes, yes. That's the what the whole thing is about. And I was just saying when you're doing it on live to a room like this, there's a lot that gets lost. If people were dancing, again, be a lot easier. And I haven't really done that where people are dancing in the box except for once. But yeah, I vibe. I don't require people dance, and when I'm DJing these late night sessions and stuff, a lot of it is vibe first. And if you want to do something else like ecstatic dance on your own, that's a thing. Because on TikTok and the way that it's set up, doing the live is you have to do a lot of talking and interacting with the people as they're coming in and out. So because of that, it sort of doesn't allow as easily for just the straight leading people through ecstatic dance. I could set up a time and be like, and have a little sticker that says, sorry, we're not going to talk during this time. It's all dance. Um, but that is a little bit harder when you're starting off on TikTok. You don't want to lose people as they're coming in because you're not interacting with them. And some people take that as very rude. So that's been an interesting balance, figuring out some of that with the meditative practices that I have. Other example being chanting. I'll be chanting and I do the chant for 108 times. I really can't talk to somebody when they come in or they leave. I can get people not doing the dance on live if they get self-conscious and learning. Yeah, I mean, we can always if they want to come up and dance, they can. But I also really like people that just come uh, to my lives. And so another element of my life, another positive psychology thing that I work on, and it's my live format for probably half of my lives, is what I call the important, not particularly urgent show. As some of you have probably caught from this long-winded interview, I do a lot of different things. And that's probably just like the surface. These are just the things I could think about right now. But there is just so many things that I am into and that I'm interested in and that I love to share. Um, but one of the big areas that I have been working into my lives is what I call the important, not particularly urgent show. And what is that? So something that is important to us is not always urgent. There's this concept of important and urgent, or not important and not urgent. Anything that we do in life can be looked at as important or not important or urgent and not urgent. Stuff that's important and urgent to us is stuff that we got to do every day for our survival. It's that, I got to go to the job so I can keep the roof over my head. I got to do, got to do X, Y, and Z. Like if you have to go to a doctor's appointment, if you got to do, it's important and it's urgent. Now, if you switch over to things that are important and not urgent, these are things that you want to do more of. That's important to you. Examples for me being I want to be better at playing guitar. I want to be better at going live. I want to be better at playing singing bowls. I want to be better at voiceover skills. I want to have better health. So I want to exercise more. I want to get outside more. All of these things are important to me. But all of the things that I mentioned have no real urgency other than my desire to do those things. And because they don't have urgency, a lot of the times we tell ourselves, because everybody has these things that are important to them and not urgent. We say, I could just do that tomorrow. I could start learning that song tomorrow. I could call that friend tomorrow. I could, go on that walk tomorrow. And we do that a lot of the times. And when we have, when we're not actively thinking about what's important to us, our time often ends up getting taken by things that are not important and not urgent. These are things that, like, there's infinite. It's that doom scroll. It's I could watch Netflix for my whole life and probably never run out of things to watch. I could, there's all of these things that are not important and not urgent. Here's one of the things, though, that's sort of like tricky about that is that these things that are not important and not urgent to us have gained urgency because of the way that marketing and just the way that all of the internet is built. Things are constantly calling for our attention and saying, hey, I'm urgent, I'm important. And a lot of the times, if we really think about it, and again, look at our life in this kind of way, is it important? Is it urgent? Is it not important? Is it not urgent? Is it important but not urgent? If we can figure out those things that are important but not urgent to us, we can do more of those things. Here's the other bit, though, with that concept, and it's another thing that's been really great and I talk about in my lives, is when we are hooked on bad feelings and emotions and stories, we are less likely to make actions that move us toward the life that we want, doing the important, not urgent things. And we do things to numb and to get rid of the feeling instead, which are away moves. And a lot of times those away moves are things that are not important and not urgent. And those things that are not important, not urgent, they're not always not important. They might, have, I really enjoy, again, media. I really enjoy video games. I really enjoy watching things with friends and playing video games with friends. If I use that, though, as my strategy to deal with difficult thoughts and emotions and feelings all the time, then it can lead to a lot of struggle and a lot of pain, and I'm not doing the things that are important to me. So walking back, so I have this important, not particularly urgent show that I have formatted. And basically what it is I do an activity for 30 minutes that's important to me. And then I take a 10-minute break where I do some actual grounding break. That could be me stretching. That could be me ecstatic dancing. That could be me practicing gratitude or thinking of 3 silly things. That could be me doing a mantra. Really, again, it could be anything as long as it's not just like a break where I'm hopping on my phone or doing something that is mindless. I want to still be engaged. I just want to do a break that is going to recharge me a little bit. So I do 30 minutes of an activity, 10-minute break, and then I do that 3 or 4 times during the live. And I switch between all of these different things that are important to me. It could be me doing singer-songwriter guitar. It could be me practicing DJing. It could be me practicing the voiceover and narration skills. And I do that through reading these books out loud during my lives. I also have been taking some of the character strength work and working on some monologues where I can make them into a fantasy sort of world because I want to do more voiceover for video games and cartoons and stuff.
We got a question in the box. It says, how do you... Where'd it go? Chat was moving real fast.
How do you give thanks to the universe? That was the question, or is there another question?
That was the question. How do you give thanks to the universe? Thank you, Becky. And
totally. So I think that connecting with the universe is like the greatest way, and expressing gratitude, seeing the beauty and the universes inside and outside of us. As I had said earlier on, and I guess that this part didn't really come out in my childhood part, but I grew up as an Episcopalian, and I was in that. And actually, around that time that I got injured in the wrestling, I had learned a lot about people using religion to commit really horrendous acts, and that really hurt to see and watch. And I had my church almost split because of some bishop that got elected, half of the church didn't agree. And I'm not going to necessarily talk about details of that, but I watched this thing happen that I questioned, how many times has this happened before? And at the time I was learning about kings and divine rights, and basically them being like, I was told I can do this because I was told that this is what the universe and what God wanted me to do. And I went, I don't like that. And I rejected completely at that time religion and spirituality. I was atheist for probably a good 4 or 5 years. And then I started really questioning and looking at all of these different philosophies and stories and going, okay, what are we all trying to share that is, we're all experiencing this life. We're all experiencing these same things. And I was starting to see similarities between different cultures and different religions and different philosophies, and being like, oh, this is sort of the same thing. It's just different wording. And I had, at that time, when I was like in that rejection-y kind of mode, I was just like, how many times has the game of telephone been played? And we've just like changed the wording, and it was misunderstood and misheard. Like, we've all played telephone when we were kids, and a lot of it was orally passed along, and not in a way that was very like solid to being able to, like, because our memories are our memories. And, as my name says, we forgot. So I started looking a little bit deeper, and I was like, okay, what are the similarities? And I ended up coming out to this, like, okay, I see where we are. Like, one of the things that was like the big click for me was interbeing and us being part of the being, us being part of the creator, us being creators within a creation, within the ultimate creation. God created us in his image, as they say. We are creators as God is, but we are not the ultimate creator. And that's where I've landed, is I am constantly just trying to give thanks and gratitude towards all of the connection that I get to experience, all of the parts that make me up, all of the being that makes me up, and all the being that makes you up, and all the people watching, and the way that we all get to come together in this gestalt of amazingness. So I guess that, I give thanks to the universe through music, through creating. I give thanks to the universe through prayer or mantras. And I give thanks to the universe through gratitude and being grateful to the things that I'm like blessed to be part of and around.
So, Scott, what's your personal idea on healing?
I feel that there is a lot of things that have happened to all of us throughout our lives that cause us stress, and that constantly come up even if we're not aware of the exact story and moment that the block happened. I had a friend tell me this morning that they had been told that they, when they were young, were loud by a parent. And because of that, they had sent me a voice message, and they weren't being loud at all, but they had expressed that worry that they had been being loud because they'd been told that when they were a child. Same thing happens with people when they're singing or doing other art. Don't be annoying, or stop that. You sound terrible, or whatever. And we hold on to those things. Even if, again, that story maybe has been way long and past. I think it's really important, and important work that I've been doing over the past few years has been learning how to be with the self in a more compassionate and loving way. Trying to cultivate that same compassion and love that you would give to a best friend or to a loved one, and giving yourself that same grace. It feels awkward, and it oftentimes will be met with resistance from the self. The self will say to some people, that's selfish. You shouldn't give yourself that. Get it from somebody else. But the issue with that is others can't always be that for us. But we are going to be with ourselves forever. until the end of our time. And it's important to learn how to have a better relationship with the self. One of the ways that I've really looked at that recently is understanding that, again, we've got these stories, we have these experiences that are constantly coming up, and they end up being these blocks to the things that we want to do. They'll talk us out of coming on and sharing our creativity, or hitting that live button, or saying hi to that person because we don't want to have a bad experience. And that part of us will be like, whoa, and it might not even like be like exactly like wording, but you'll get maybe that uneasy feeling, and you'll be like, ooh. And I think, for sometimes like it is like a voice for me, and it might be like, whoa, don't do that. Like, oh, hold on. If you do that, people are going to think you're weird, or people are going to think that you're this or that, or you're going to not do it right. And those stories, those thoughts, those feelings, though completely valid, and they do hold some really good nuggets of truth sometimes, are not the truth of who we are. They are a part of our experience. And to learn how to unhook from those thoughts, to acknowledge them and then unhook, is massively powerful. Because as I was saying, when we're hooked on those thoughts and those feelings and those emotions, we tend to make choices that take us away from the life that we want. And we start making these choices of things that are not important and not urgent to us. And we just binge watch our shows or eat and just try to get away from the bad feelings. But if we can figure out, again, a way to be more compassionate to the self, to approach these stories that are coming up, these emotions that are coming up, in a way that goes, hey, I noticed this feeling of anxiety is coming up right now, or this story about when you were like 3 is coming up, and and having that acknowledgement part separated a little bit from the thoughts, the feelings, and the emotions can give one an immense amount of power. Because all of a sudden you go, okay, this is not me. I still have choice. I always have choice in a moment. And it might be a little choice, but I can choose to move toward my values, toward my dreams. I can't guarantee I'll make it to those dreams, but I can always choose to live with like these strengths. And so it's like, if I can unhook, I can be like, so, and this is where I was saying that those stories and those feelings and those emotions, they can hold nuggets of truth. A lot of the times they're coming up because they're expressing something that we don't have or feel like we don't have. And so it might be like, oh, I really want community. I really want connection. I really want to express my creativity. And there are these things that'll come up that'll be like, well, you want to do that, but it could bring you pain. It could bring this thing. And yeah, it could. That voice and that story is sort of sometimes acts like an overactive best friend, where it's like, oh, you're not really helping the situation. Like, I'm grateful that you are like looking at me right now in that way, but you are pulling us into a spiral kind of thing. And so again, acknowledging and being like, oh, there's some anxiousness coming up. And that's because I want this thing in my life, or I want to experience this. We can take that information and we can, be like, okay, I want to share more creativity. I want to make more connections with people. I can do actions that take me in that direction. And there are lots of different ways to unhook: the meditations, the chanting, singing bowls, dancing. So I really do. I try to figure out ways to help people break away from the things that have caused blockages for them, and they're expressing their authentic self. Because it's so much better in life when we do get to be the self that we, feel we are. And we're not putting on a show, and we're not trying to impress other people, or, and we still always are going to like have elements of that. But I've really enjoyed coming here onto TikTok because I've gotten to be the most authentic version of myself. And I've gotten to explore a lot of these concepts a lot deeper. And because I come on daily, I get to practice daily. And consistency is king. Like the more you practice anything, the better you're going to get, and you're going to get exponentially better. So, I mean, I always, I love telling people, I can't say I always, but I love telling people, yeah, go live. Even if you don't think you have anything to go live with, and go live, practice, what you do love. If you want to do more drawing, if you want to do more painting, like get on and do it. And you'll find community, you'll find people that support, and you'll get to do it every day, and you'll just get better at it. Or maybe not every day, but more often. Um, so yeah, I guess that it's all over the place, but
So, with that being said, if your voice could speak to someone who is stuck in fear or silence, what would you say? Thank you.
I would definitely connect with love. So there's a lot of different things that I could say. I mean, so from the science, and I think that for me, it really depends on the person and the situation. I really do try to read situations. One of my character strengths that has landed as my seventh character strength for many times. Sometimes they will shuffle, is social intelligence. So, for somebody, it might be taking a more scientific approach and being like, hey, they've done studies on gratitude journaling. And if you write three good things before you go to bed every night, they found that it's almost as effective as taking med for it. Doing three funny things and thinking of three funny things, similar, can also make you feel happier. I would say if somebody is struggling with creativity and having anxiety coming up, or just the anxieties coming up about anything, one of the coolest, and I come back to it often, when I was in a therapy session with a counselor that I'm no longer connected to, not for any reason other than life just happened and I've gone separate ways with that counselor. But they brought up, when we have that feeling, it's like an X on a treasure map. And if we're willing to do a little bit of digging there, there's some treasure a lot of the times where that anxiety arises. I've also heard the saying of like, do one thing that makes you a little anxious every day. Stress is the way that we grow. Overstress will injure us, but stress all around, that's the way our muscles grow. It's the way our minds grow. We have to cause enough stress for the growth to happen. And so, with anxiety around creativity, there's going to be some stress there. And there's going to be stress there too, a lot of the times, because creativity is such a personal thing for a lot of people, especially things like singing, where it's like, that's such a part of me, or that's been an area of difficulty for me, where I've been like, oh, if you judge my singing, you're judging me. And that's not always the case either. And it's funny because, yeah, like we do get caught up on the bad a bit more than the good. And so like we could have one person tell us one negative thing and have the rest of the room all be telling us how amazing they thought that what you showed them was. But that could definitely be something that triggers it for you. But I would, say there are a lot of different practices to get over those blocks, and finding a way to unhook from the thoughts, stories, and emotions is so key, because those are the things that are truly holding one back. When you want to do something and you don't, very rarely is it just, I'm not doing the thing. There's something that's going on internally that gets you to not do it, that talks you out of it. And it's not always malicious. It might literally be like saying like, hey, you don't got enough time to do this. Example being, I love making music. I could sit in a studio and make music for 24 hours. I've in times been like, oh, I don't have 24 hours or 12 hours or 6 hours to make music, and had the story talk me out of, well, since you don't have that much time, it's not worth doing it all. So again, being aware of when these things are coming up and saying, okay, I see that's coming up. And maybe again, it does have a little bit of truth, but it's oftentimes trying to keep us from getting hurt. And if we don't try, its logic is we won't get hurt because we won't fail. But by not trying, we automatically fail. And so it's like really important, again, to realize as this sort of voice comes into action, because it's not always negative. It's trying to be a good friend. It's trying to protect us. It's trying to connect with us. And it's really important to like realize that it's only part of us, that these thoughts, stories, and emotion are not the whole shebang, and to learn ways to unhook. And that could, again, be dance, it could be art, it could be chanting or other forms of meditation, but finding ways and having multiple ones. I've heard of that wellness, especially as having a toolbox full of a bunch of different tools. And not every tool works for every job. So it's important to have a wide variety of tools to unhook and to connect back with the self. So that if, maybe chanting doesn't work for me for a time, but going outside into nature and getting on a walk would. And remembering that we have all of these different ways to do that. And that's sometimes making a list, like literally, and having it by the door and being like, these are things that are important to me. I'd like to practice these more. These are my top strengths. I actively want to be using these more. Because if we aren't thinking about it, a lot of the times, again, our attention is constantly being pulled from all of these different ways, because that's the way that all of these companies and groups, they got to make it.
Right.
And so the way to do that is to cause our minds and our thoughts to go in certain directions and to make us think that the things are way more important sometimes than they are.
It's interesting. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate you coming today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Very, very informative.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me just talk.
Very informative. Glad I didn't have to do much. That's great.
But yeah, I'm going to hop on in just a little bit, probably in the next 15 to 30 minutes onto a live of my own. I'm going to be doing some DJing today, and we are celebrating community. And so I'm really excited. We'll be doing a little bit of that ecstatic dance stuff and just hanging out, having a good time.
And with that being said, from a childhood surrounded by love and friendship to a life filled with rhythm and reflection and compassion, today's guest reminds us that healing doesn't have to be loud. It can be felt in the pulse of a beat, the stillness of night, and the echo of a shared story. This was the power of one voice, one that keeps creating, caring, and rising. Until next time, keep moving, keep healing, and never underestimate the rhythm in your soul. Stay real and stay rare. A second.